She was clinging to the highest branch of an old sycamore, her hair tangled by the wind, a hand-painted sign swinging below her feet. "White man don't forgive." Below her, 2 little girls cried out for their mama, and beside them stood a lone cowboy, one hand raised not in fear, but in grace. What he didn't know was that saving her would save him too. Before we begin this unforgettable story of second chances, quiet miracles, and the healing power of love, if these stories touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe. It's how we keep sharing hope, one soul-stirring tale at a time. Now saddle up. The story begins. The New Mexico sun was brutal that afternoon, burning the land into a silence so deep it could almost swallow a man whole. The pickup's engine purred under Wade Bennett's hand as he drove along the dusty back road leading to the old Bennett Ranch, the place he once called home, and now reluctantly would again. In the passenger seat, his 8-year-old daughter Annie hummed softly, sketching clouds on the dusty window with her fingertip. She hadn't said much since the funeral. Wade didn't push. He understood quiet better than most. It was his native language now. He squinted toward the horizon. The wooden sign for Miller's Creek swung in the dry wind. Just past it, something caught his eye out of place in the landscape of brittle grass and skeletal trees. A shape, high up in a tree. Human. Wade slammed the brakes. Dad Annie's voice cracked as the truck jolted to a stop. Wade threw open the door, his boots hitting the cracked dirt hard. He ran toward the tree, an old dying cottonwood, its limbs blackened and splintered by years of lightning and drought. There, tangled among the upper branches, was a woman. She wore torn denim overalls and a faded shirt that clung to her like dust. Her hair was matted, her face streaked with dirt. She was climbing higher, one bare foot slipping as her hand reached for something above her. Below the tree, 2 small girls, identical twins, stood barefoot crying. "Mama, no, come down, please." Wade's chest tightened. He'd seen enough trauma during his firefighter years to know this was a crisis, unraveling fast. "Hey," he shouted, running toward them. "Ma'am, you need to come down, that tree's not stable." The woman didn't react. She looked past him, lost somewhere far inside herself. In her hands, she held a small, ragged toy, a cloth rabbit with one eye missing. She cradled it like it was a child. "She thinks it's our brother," one of the twins sobbed. "But we don't have a brother." Wade didn't wait. He kicked off his boots and began climbing. The bark peeled under his fingers, brittle and dry. Every creak of the limb beneath him was a warning. She was only 15 feet up, but high enough. One wrong move, one snap of dry wood, and she could fall. Or jump. "Don't come up here," the woman rasped, finally noticing him. Her eyes were wide and wild. "I'm trying to give him the sky. He's never had it before." Wade steadied himself, breathing slow. "Ma'am, I know you're trying to help someone. But your girls, they're scared. They need you to come down. Let me help you." She looked past him again, her lip trembling. "They took him from me. I never got to hold him." "I believe you," Wade said, softly inching closer. "But you're holding someone now who needs you. Right down there." He reached out his hand. The woman's body tensed. The wind blew harder, a dry gust that shook the thin branches beneath them. One foot slipped. She screamed. Wade lunged. He caught her wrist just as the limb snapped beneath her. Her body dropped, jerking his shoulder painfully. He grunted, bracing his weight, then guided her down until they both collapsed into the dirt below. The twins rushed to her. She lay on the ground, dazed, clutching the toy rabbit to her chest. Her eyes fluttered shut, then open. She whispered something he barely heard. "I was just trying to bring him back. With the wind." Wade turned to the girls, both tear-streaked and trembling. "Are you girls okay?" he asked gently. They nodded, eyes wide with a kind of sadness, far too old for their tiny faces. "We live over there, in the field," one said, pointing toward the remnants of an old tent surrounded by brush. "No one comes for us," the other added. Wade exhaled. The logical thing to do would be to call the sheriff, maybe Child Protective Services, but something about the way the woman had clutched that toy, like it was the last string holding her together, struck him hard. He remembered his wife Rachel in her final weeks, holding Annie's tiny sweater like a lifeline. And Annie sitting by her mother's hospital bed, whispering stories with a child's bravery. He looked down at the three of them, broken, hungry, clinging to each other. "Come on," he said, finally, voice low. "Let's get you all cleaned up. You can stay at the ranch tonight." The woman blinked. "We don't have any money." "I didn't ask for any," Wade replied, already lifting one of the girls onto his hip. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "June." "All right, June. I'm Wade. And this here's Annie. Let's get you all inside before that wind gets mean." As he led them back toward the truck, he felt a tiny hand slip into his. Not Annie's, but one of the twins. They didn't say anything, but the grip was tight, as if they'd been waiting far too long for someone to take hold and not let go. The ranch hadn't changed much since Wade left. The old windmill creaked in the distance, turning lazily like it had all the time in the world. The porch steps still groaned under every footfall, and the swing where Rachel once read to Annie swayed softly in the wind, as if haunted by memory. He hadn't planned on guests, certainly not three of them. Yet here they were, the twins sitting shoulder to shoulder on the couch like feral kittens freshly bathed, and June wrapped in one of Rachel's old flannel blankets, staring blankly at the floor. Wade had offered food. The girls devoured the peanut butter sandwiches, like they hadn't eaten in days, and they probably hadn't. June had taken one bite, then set hers down with trembling hands. Annie stood in the hallway watching everything without a word, her sketch pad hugged to her chest. She was good at observing. Quiet came easy to her, too. "I need to call someone," Wade finally said, breaking the heavy stillness. He didn't mean it as a threat, but June flinched as if it were. "No," she whispered. He kept his voice even. "I can't just let you live in a field. There are laws. They'll separate us," she said, eyes wide and terrified. "They always do. They tried once back in Albuquerque. I ran. We've been running ever since." One of the twins, Ellie, he thought, crawled into June's lap, wrapping tiny arms around her. "We stay together," the little girl murmured. "Always." Wade exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Then help me understand. Who are you really, June?" She didn't answer right away. She reached down, smoothing Ellie's tangled hair, her hand shaking just slightly. "I was a teacher. Art. K through 5. Back before everything. Back before the fire." Wade waited. "My husband, Tom. He worked at a gas station outside Santa Fe. There was an accident. Gas line blew. He didn't make it." Her voice cracked. "I was 6 months pregnant with the girls. Something inside me just went quiet after that." The world stopped making sense. He looked at her closely. Her eyes weren't wild now, just weary. The kind of exhaustion you can't sleep off, the kind that comes from fighting too many battles with no one on your side. "I don't get violent," she said. "I don't use. I'm just forgetful sometimes. And loud. And sad." She said the last word like it was an apology. Wade leaned back in the chair. The old cushion squeaked beneath him. "I'm not a social worker," he said finally. "But I know how it feels to lose someone. I know what it's like to be left holding the pieces, wondering how you're supposed to go on when half your world is gone." June looked at him, then really looked. Her eyes softened. "I'm not trying to dump this on you," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "But for now you need a place to land. This place may be broken, but so are we. You'll fit in just fine." From the hallway, Annie peeked out again. She was still hugging her sketchbook, but her shoulders had relaxed. "Is it okay if I draw them?" she asked quietly. Wade glanced at June. June nodded. Annie padded into the living room, sat cross-legged on the floor, and flipped to a fresh page. Ellie and Nora watched in fascination, whispering to each other. June wiped at her eyes. They've never had a friend before. Wade said nothing. The moment was too delicate for words. That night, he set up blankets and spare pillows in the guest room. June tucked the twins in, humming a tune Wade didn't recognize. Something soft and southern, like a hymn that had forgotten its church. As he passed the open door, he saw Ellie already asleep, one arm flung across her sister. June sat on the edge of the bed, stroking Nora's forehead, her face lit by the golden hue of the hallway light. "Thank you," she whispered without looking up, "for not calling them." Wade paused in the doorway. "This isn't forever, June. I know," she said. He walked away feeling like a hypocrite. He'd meant it, but some part of him already hoped she'd stay. Later that night, Wade stood on the back porch staring up at the sky. The stars were fierce here, untamed. Nothing like the smog-muted ones back in the city. Annie joined him wrapped in a blanket. "She's not crazy," she said, leaning against his arm. "I know. She talks to the stuffed bunny sometimes, like it's real. Sometimes people do that when they hurt." Wade said gently, "When they're trying to remember something important." Annie looked up at him. "Are we going to keep them?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know," he said truthfully. "But we'll keep them tonight. That's a start." They stood there a long time watching the stars burn holes through the darkness. Inside the house, a woman who had once been broken tucked her daughters in. And for the first time in a long while, no one was running. The morning arrived slow and soft, the way it always did in the high desert. Wade Bennett stood by the kitchen window, sipping coffee from the chipped mug Rachel once loved. The sun bled into the horizon in pale ribbons of orange and rose, washing the ranch in something that almost looked like hope. Inside the house was still not silent, but full of the small noises of a new rhythm being born. Footsteps, whispers, the distant creak of floorboards as the twins tiptoed past the hallway, trying not to wake their mother. It was a kind of music, Wade thought, the sound of life trying to restart. He turned from the window as June shuffled in hair still tangled, wearing one of his old flannel shirts that nearly swallowed her. She looked up, cautious, but alert. "I hope you don't mind," she murmured. "I couldn't sleep. Made myself some tea." "Course I don't mind," Wade said, nodding toward the kettle. "This place has been too quiet for too long." June half smiled, then looked down. Wade studied her as she cradled the mug in both hands. She wasn't twitchy or erratic this morning, just tired, worn, like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for years and only now realized she could set it down. The twins clattered into the room, then breathless and barefoot. "We fed the chickens." Nora beamed, her face smeared with what looked like birdseed. "And we named them Ellie," added proudly. "Clara, Henny Penny, and Beyoncé." June blinked. "You named the chickens Beyoncé." "They needed confidence," Ellie said matter-of-factly. Wade chuckled. "Can't argue with that." June stared at her daughters, then back at Wade. "They've never laughed this much. Not in years." "Well, chickens are a solid influence," he said. But he knew it wasn't just the chickens. It was safety. It was space. It was kindness. Later that day, Wade brought out a faded box of art supplies he'd found in the attic. Rachel's old brushes, half-dried tubes of paint, a cracked watercolor set. He placed them on the kitchen table without saying much. June froze when she saw them. Her hand hovered over a brush, as if afraid it might burn her. "I haven't painted in years," she whispered. You don't have to make anything perfect, Wade said. Just touch something again. That afternoon, while the girls drew pictures of smiling chickens, and Annie carefully sketched a portrait of Beyoncé the hen, June sat at the corner of the table and dipped a brush in water. She didn't paint a scene or a person, just strokes of color. Blue, then gray, then a sudden violent red. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. It was grief on paper. And when she was done, she let the brush fall from her hand like it had taken a piece of her pain with it. By evening, things had started to settle into an odd temporary peace. Dinner was Spaghetti Wade's fallback when he couldn't think of anything else. The girls slurped noodles like they'd never tasted something so fancy, and June insisted on doing the dishes after. Wade stepped outside to gather wood for the stove, the air crisp with coming fall. That's when he heard it, the soft sound of glass breaking. He rushed back inside. The kitchen light was still on. June stood frozen, staring down at a shattered plate. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. "I was trying to help. I dropped it." "It's okay, I'll pay for it," she blurted. "We'll leave tomorrow. I shouldn't have. This was a mistake." Wade stepped forward, quiet but firm. "It's just a plate, June. I break things," she whispered, eyes wet. "That's what I do." He shook his head slowly. "No. That's what happened to you. It's not who you are." The silence between them stretched. Then from behind them came a small voice. "Don't go, Mommy." Nora stood in the doorway in her pajamas, hair sticking up on one side, thumb in her mouth. "We like it here," she mumbled. "This house has bacon." June laughed, a choked, startled sound. Then she sank to the floor knees, giving out, and pulled Nora into her arms. Wade turned away, letting them have the moment, but his hands trembled as he picked up the broken pieces from the floor. That night, as Wade sat alone on the porch again, Annie joined him. She handed him a drawing, rough pencil lines, but unmistakable. It was June, holding hands with Ellie and Nora. Behind them stood a man, Wade, and next to him Annie, all of them smiling beneath a giant cottonwood tree. He swallowed. "You like them," she said softly. "I do." "Do they get to stay?" He looked down at the drawing again. "I don't know." But what he meant was, "God, I hope so." Nights in the high desert had a way of hollowing sound. Even the crickets seemed respectful of the silence at the Bennett Ranch, like they knew not to disturb whatever fragile peace had settled there. Wade was up late again, working in the barn under the dim bulb that always flickered when the wind shifted. He liked the solitude. It was different from loneliness. Solitude meant choice. Loneliness had happened to him. But this quiet, it was his to manage. Inside the house, the girls had long since gone to bed. Annie had tucked herself in after reading the same library book for the 4th time, and the twins had collapsed like puppies across their shared mattress. Only June remained restless. Wade noticed the flicker of her silhouette through the window, curled in a chair, eyes trained on something invisible in the distance. She was always watching. Always somewhere else. When he came in around midnight, he found her still awake at the kitchen table, clutching a pencil and a scrap of paper, like they were talismans. "I didn't mean to stay up," she murmured without looking up. "It's your house too, June," he said gently. "You don't have to explain yourself." She smiled faintly, then looked down at the paper. A rough sketch, no more than a few lines, sat between her hands. Wade leaned closer. "Is that a horse?" She nodded, embarrassed. "Or what's left of one. It's good." "It's a mess," she whispered. "But it's the first thing I've drawn since Tom died." She looked up at him, then eyes glistening. "I thought if I ever touched a pencil again, it would break me open." Sometimes that's what healing feels like. She didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. The next morning, Wade made pancakes Annie's favorite. Ellie tried to flip one and turned it into a floor ornament, which made everyone laugh, even June, especially June. After breakfast, June disappeared for a while. Wade found her in the old guest room, the one Rachel had once used as a studio. The place still smelled like turpentine and forgotten dreams. June stood in the corner, looking at the dust-covered easel, like it might come alive. "Can I use it?" she asked. "It's yours if you want it." She reached out and touched the frame fingers, trembling like they were brushing a wound. Later that afternoon, Wade brought her a box, a faded tin container he'd found in the attic, packed with Rachel's old charcoal sticks and dry watercolors. June took it as if it were sacred. That night, something woke Wade. A soft creak, a whisper of movement. He stepped into the hallway just in time to see June slipping into the girls' room, barefoot and quiet. She knelt beside their bed, watching them sleep the way a person watches something they're sure they'll never deserve. Wade waited until she left before walking down the hall to close the front windows. A breeze had kicked up the kind that carried sand and memory with it. As he passed June's door, it stood open just a crack. He hesitated. Not to pry, just to understand. What he saw wasn't a woman asleep. It was a woman unraveling carefully in silence. June lay curled under the blanket, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face tucked into her shoulder like she was trying to disappear. Beside her pillow sat a sketch pad. Open. Wade stepped closer. Just one glance. What he saw stopped him cold. There were dozens of sketches, not of landscapes or still lifes, but of people, of moments, the kind no camera could capture. One was of Annie smiling behind a curtain of hair. Another showed Ellie and Nora curled up on the porch swing, one asleep against the other. But the one that caught him hardest was a sketch of him. Bent over the stove, flipping pancakes with Nora clinging to his leg and a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The caption beneath it read, in soft graphite script, "A man who doesn't ask for anything, but gives everything." Wade felt something in his chest shift, a tectonic reordering, like a door creaked open inside him that had been nailed shut for years. He backed away quietly, respectfully, and returned to his room where sleep didn't come. The next morning, June didn't say anything about the sketch pad. She didn't need to. Something had changed between them. Not spoken aloud, but shared, like a glance across a crowded room or a hand lightly brushed. Later, while the girls were outside collecting sticks and treasures, June approached Wade near the barn. "I've been trying to draw what I remember," she said. He set down the bucket of feed. "And it comes in flashes. Not faces, not voices. Just emotions." She looked down at her hands, like guilt and loss. "And once in a while, love." She paused. "I don't know what we are to you. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want you to feel sorry for us." "I don't," Wade said. She looked up. "I don't feel sorry for you, June. I admire you. What you've survived. What you're still trying to build." She blinked, stunned. "You make it sound like I'm someone worth knowing." "You are." Silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was full. That evening, Wade found another sketch left on the porch swing, this one folded in half. When he opened it, there were just 2 words written beneath a drawing of 5 people sitting at a dinner table, laughing mid-bite. Almost home. The town of 3 Pines didn't have a traffic light. What it had was memory, long, narrow memory, that stretched back generations and rarely let anyone outrun their past. Wade had grown up among its wheat fields and wooden fences, and for most of his life it had felt like home. But small towns had long memories, and even longer shadows. And when something new or someone broken entered their quiet rhythm, the whispers followed like smoke on wind. At first it was harmless. The waitress at Jim's diner gave him a side glance when he ordered 2 extra kids' pancakes to go. The gas station clerk raised a brow when Ellie and Nora ran barefoot through the store, clutching a pack of animal crackers like it was buried treasure. But by the end of the week, the whispers had names. She's the one who climbed a tree, right? Some kind of drifter. With kids that don't even go to school, isn't he the widower? Why's he taking in a crazy woman and her strays? Wade heard it. He always had. But he'd learned long ago not to dignify poison with breath. Still, it stung more than he admitted, because June heard it too. That Saturday, they went into town together for the first time. Wade needed fencing wire, the girls needed boots, and June needed courage. She stood outside the hardware store, her hands buried in the pockets of her borrowed flannel, as Wade tied a coil of wire into the truck bed. Ellie and Nora played on the sidewalk, giggling over a cracked gumball machine that spat out dusty candies. Across the street, a few women from the church stood clustered near the bakery. One of them, Rhonda Shaw, stared too long. Another leaned in, whispering behind her hand. June noticed. She shifted on her feet, her shoulders tightening. She turned toward the truck, but Wade stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Hey," he said gently. "They don't know you. They don't want to. You don't owe them anything." June's mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at the twins, then across the street again. "I used to be the one who judged," she said softly, "back when I had a husband and a mortgage and a book club. Now I'm the one they cross the street to avoid." Wade didn't say anything. He just stood beside her until the whispers faded. The tension came to a head 2 days later. An envelope was slipped under the front door sometime after dark. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "This isn't a shelter. Be careful who you let into your home. No signature. No heart. Just cowardice in courier font." Wade stood in the hallway, letter in hand, heart pounding harder than he liked. Annie peeked out from behind her bedroom door. "Is it about her?" she asked. He nodded. Slowly. "I heard someone on the porch." He exhaled, jaw clenched. Then he crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash without another word. The next morning, he didn't mention it to June. She had enough ghosts already. But silence had weight, and June had always been good at hearing what went unsaid. That afternoon, Grace Tully showed up unannounced. She stepped out of her dusty Ford sedan in her usual no-nonsense pantsuit and Sensible Flats clipboard in hand. June was outside with the girls, tying ribbons into the manes of 2 slightly confused ponies. Grace approached Wade near the barn, her tone brisk. "I've received concerns from community members. They say you've taken in a woman with a history of mental illness, one who's unstable, unvetted, and raising minors." Wade kept his voice even. "I know what people say. But what do you say?" "Grace." She looked at him for a long moment. Then toward the pasture. "She's calmer than the last time I saw her. She's safe. Trauma doesn't vanish in a week, Wade." "No," he agreed. "But neither does human dignity." Grace studied him, then flipped her clipboard closed. "Can I talk to her?" "She's not a criminal. She's a mother. That's why I want to talk to her." June sat stiffly on the porch bench as Grace asked questions. Where had she been living? How long since she'd had stable housing? Had she ever been institutionalized? "Yes," June said, voluntarily. "Once, after my husband died. Were you ever a danger to yourself or your children? I was a danger to my grief," she replied. "But never to them." When the conversation ended, Grace didn't offer judgment, just a quiet nod. "You're building something here," she said. "Don't let it get buried by other people's fear." June blinked. "Why are you being kind?" Grace shrugged. "I've seen a lot of mothers walk away." "You didn't. That counts for something." That evening, Wade found June out by the garden, kneeling in the soil, her hands covered in earth. He knelt beside her. "I'm not good at planting things," she said. "I always dig too shallow. Or too deep." or forget the sun. Wade said nothing, but I thought if the girls saw something grow, they might believe things can. He reached into the dirt beside her, gently covering the root she'd left exposed. "We're all just trying to take root somewhere." She smiled, small but real. "They still think I'm crazy," she murmured. Wade met her eyes. "Then let them think." That night, June taped a new sketch to the fridge. 5 chickens wearing crowns, 2 girls with boots too big, a man holding a hammer, and a woman holding a seedling in her palm. Beneath it, in neat handwriting, "We are not broken, just rebuilding." It was supposed to be just another late summer afternoon, the kind that hung in the air like a half-finished breath, thick with humidity and stillness. The clouds had been building since morning, stacking one over the other like bruises across the sky. But no one expected the storm to break so suddenly or so hard. The girls had gone out behind the barn to play in the shallow creek bed, which most days barely trickled. Wade had let them go. It was their favorite place to pretend the world was safe. June had been sketching under the porch awning, watching them from a distance, her pencil moving in slow, thoughtful arcs. Wade was inside fixing the door frame when the first rumble cracked across the land. He looked up. The sky had gone an unnatural green, and the wind had shifted direction fast. Sharp, purposeful. Then came the rain. Hard. Heavy. Relentless. Wade rushed to the porch. June was already standing, eyes locked on the field. "They're not back," she said. Voice suddenly small. Wade froze. "Where?" She pointed. The creek. A bolt of lightning split the horizon, and then, without a word, June ran. The creek was no longer a creek. The sudden downpour had turned the gentle trickle into a raging brown surge, swollen with mud and debris. The current was stronger than it looked. Wade knew that immediately. He reached the edge just in time to see Annie slip. Her foot caught on a submerged root, and she pitched sideways, tumbling into the water with a sharp cry. Annie Wade's voice tore out of him as he leapt forward. But June was faster. She dove in without hesitation. Shoes, clothes, all of it cutting through the water with a fury that didn't seem possible for someone so slight. The current caught her, dragged her forward, but she didn't stop. She reached Annie, wrapped her arms around the girl, and kicked toward the bank with every ounce of strength she had. Wade splashed in halfway to meet them, pulling them both out together. His arms were shaking his face, soaked rain, or tears he couldn't tell. June collapsed on the bank, coughing, gasping for air, her arms still locked around Annie. "I've got her," Wade said, voice tight. But June didn't let go. "I've got her," he repeated, softer. June blinked up at him. Her lips were blue, her arms loosened, and Wade pulled Annie close against him, checking for injury. She was crying, but okay. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his shoulder. "I slipped Daddy. I didn't mean to." Wade held her tighter. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." He turned to June. She was sitting up now, shaking her palms scraped raw. "You jumped in," he said. She nodded. "I didn't think. I just saw her go under, and I moved." Wade knelt beside her, touching her shoulder gently. "You saved my daughter." June looked away, eyes brimming. "She's not mine." But in that moment, she felt like she was. Wade didn't speak for a long time. The rain softened. The wind quieted. All that remained was breath and heartbeat and the shared silence of something sacred. Then he said, "She's mine, and I love her more than life. But today, you were her mother in every way that matters." June blinked, her face crumpled. And then, for the first time since the day they met, she allowed herself to weep openly. Back at the house, Wade wrapped June in towels and sat her near the stove where the fire cracked, warm against the wet chill in her bones. The girls hovered like shadows, quiet and wide-eyed. June kept whispering, "I'm fine," over and over. But Wade knew better. He'd seen this kind of shock in the firehouse when the adrenaline wore off and the truth seeped in. He made tea. June didn't drink it, but she held the cup like it anchored her. Later, he found her in the guest room, sitting on the floor, with her knees tucked to her chest. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, but her voice said otherwise. "I didn't know I could still be brave," she said. "Not after everything." Wade crouched beside her. "You didn't just survive today," he said. "You protected. You chose love over fear. That's not just brave, June. That's heroic." She shook her head. "I'm not a hero. I'm a mess." "We all are," Wade replied. "Heroes are just the people who show up anyway." The next morning, a new sketch appeared on the fridge. It showed a roaring river, wild and fierce. In the middle, a woman, small, determined, swimming against the current, arms around a child. Above it, written in soft pencil, she didn't think. She just loved. Wade stood there a long time, reading those words over and over, as if they were written to him. Maybe they were. Later that day, as the sun returned and dried the land, Wade sat on the porch with Annie. She rested her head on his shoulder, quiet as usual. "Is she staying?" Annie asked. Wade didn't answer right away. "She saved me." "I know. She's not crazy." "I know that too." He looked out across the yard where June was brushing mud from the porch steps with Nora and Ellie helping beside her, all three of them laughing. "She's the bravest person I've ever known," he said softly. Annie nodded. "I think you love her?" Wade smiled. "I think I do too." The days after the flood shifted the rhythm of the Bennett household. Something had changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but unmistakably. It was in the way June began brushing Nora's hair every morning with quiet, deliberate care, as if each knot unraveled a little fear from the past. It was in how Ellie slipped her hand into June's when they walked as naturally as a flower leaning into sunlight. And it was in how Wade watched it all silently, like a man witnessing spring after a long, unspoken winter. He didn't rush it. Wade Bennett was a patient man forged by fire fatherhood and too much loss. But he was no longer afraid to hope. That morning began like most eggs on the stove, coffee warming in the pot, and the smell of sawdust lingering from Wade's early project in the barn. June stood by the window, her sleeves rolled up, humming softly as she dried dishes. The girl sat at the kitchen table scribbling in coloring books, two small heads bent close together, hair still damp from baths. Miss June, Nora asked, not looking up. "Did you ever have a mom?" June's hand stilled. "Yes," she said, turning slightly. "But she couldn't stay. Some people can't, even if they love you." Ellie tilted her head. "But you still love her?" "I do," June replied, a quiet breath caught in her voice. Even now, there was a silence, not awkward, just full. Then Ellie spoke without looking up. "Can I call you Mommy?" The words dropped like a pebble into still water. June blinked. Wade, halfway into the room, stopped in his tracks. Nora looked up, startled. "Ellie!" But Ellie kept coloring. Not all the time. Just sometimes. Like when I feel it. June didn't answer right away. Her hands trembled slightly on the dish towel. She stared at the child, her big eyes, her matter-of-fact voice, and something inside her softened, then split. "I'd like that," June said, barely above a whisper. Ellie smiled, still coloring. Later that afternoon, Wade found June outside, sitting on the back porch steps. Her knees pulled up, a mug of tea cradled between both hands. She didn't turn when he approached. "She called me Mommy," she said, voice tremulous. "Just once, like it wasn't a big deal." "It's the biggest deal," Wade said. June turned. Her eyes were bright and wet. I thought that word was gone from my life forever, like something I didn't deserve, like something broken. Wade sat beside her, letting the quiet fill the space between them. "You didn't steal it," he said gently. "She gave it." June swallowed. "I don't want to hurt them. I'm still me. You're the safest thing that's happened to them in a long time. But I'm still figuring it out, Wade. I still have days where I can't sleep, or where I look in the mirror and don't trust what I see." He looked at her. Really looked. "I know," he said, "but I've also seen you laugh with them, make them feel seen, brave the river for them. You don't have to be perfect, just real." June set the mug down beside her and wrapped her arms around her knees. For a moment she didn't speak. Then, softly, "When I was at my worst, the voices in my head told me I didn't deserve anything good. That love was for people who weren't broken." And now, Wade asked. June took a breath. "Now I'm trying to prove them wrong." That evening they had dinner on the porch. Wade grilled burgers, and the girls laid out napkins and carried lemonade in wide, careful strides. June brought out a bowl of sweet corn and caught Wade watching her from the grill. "Say it," she teased. "Whatever it is." "I was just thinking." He started flipping a burger. "It's been a long time since this house felt like a home." June raised an eyebrow. "And now it does." He met her eyes. "Yeah, it really does." The girl, sticky with ketchup and laughter, didn't notice the look that passed between them. But if they had, they might have recognized it. The look of two people slowly becoming something more than just grateful survivors. That night, as June tucked Ellie into bed, the little girl turned on her side and whispered, "Mommy, sing the rain song June's breath caught." She had made up a lullaby days ago, humming to calm Ellie when thunder rolled. It was just a soft, simple tune, with no real lyrics. But it had settled the child's trembling. Now she sang it again quietly, with her fingers stroking Ellie's forehead. As the girl drifted into sleep, June sat there, unmoving, her own tears falling silently down her cheeks. In the hallway, Wade waited, not wanting to interrupt something holy. When she finally stepped out, he saw the rawness in her face and did the only thing he could. He held her. Not like a lover. Not yet. But like someone who'd seen the worst of her and was still there, arms open, solid and still. Later, under the stars, Wade sat alone on the porch, a mug of black coffee steaming in his hands. He heard the creak of the door and knew it was her before she spoke. She asked again, June said. "Called me Mommy twice today." Wade looked up. "You okay?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think I want to be." He offered the mug. She took it. Their hands brushed. And then June sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "Tell me this is real," she whispered. Wade turned toward her, his voice low and sure. "It's real, June. And it's just the beginning." The package arrived on a Tuesday. A simple manila envelope with no return address dropped into the rusty mailbox at the end of Wade's gravel drive. The postmark read, Bozeman, Montana, and that was all. Wade picked it up on his way back from town. He thought nothing of it at first, just another misplaced bill or rural catalog. But as he walked through the front gate, he noticed June on the porch, barefoot, rocking gently with Ellie, asleep in her arms. He almost kept walking. Almost. But something made him pause. The envelope was thin, but inside it was a folded piece of paper handwriting, in blue ink, small slanted. And across the top in nervous capital letters, "To my daughter, if you ever find me." His heart dropped. June didn't open it until that night. The girls were asleep, curled like commas under matching quilts. Wade had offered to burn the letter if she'd wanted. June shook her head. "I need to know," she said quietly. She sat at the kitchen table, under the soft hum of a ceiling fan, and unfolded the page. Wade sat across from her, saying nothing. The handwriting was unmistakable. So was the voice in the words. Juniper. If this ever reaches you, it means I'm a braver woman than I used to be. Or maybe just older. Maybe both. I know you've spent most of your life wondering why I left. Why I let you fall apart without me. Why I didn't fight harder. I have no good answer. Only that when your father died, I broke too. And I didn't know how to be a mother while drowning. I heard you were in treatment. I heard you lost custody. I heard a lot. But I never stopped hoping you'd come back. If you want to find me, I live at the trailer park on 5th Street. I'm not proud of who I've been, June. But if you're ready, I'd like to try being someone new. Maybe you'd let me meet the girls. I've always dreamed of granddaughters. M. The letter trembled in June's hands. Her face had gone still, not cold, not angry, but hollowed. Wade reached forward, gently removing the paper from her grip before it tore. She sent this weeks ago, he said softly. Before the flood. Maybe even before you found us. I never wanted her to find me, June whispered. But she's She's not June. Cut in more sharply than she meant. Then quieter. She was. But not the way I needed her to be. Wade said nothing, allowing the room to breathe. She left when I was 14. June continued. One night I woke up and the fridge was empty. She'd taken the car and driven straight into a bottle. For 5 years I thought she was dead. And then she came back. For a week. Said she was clean. Promised she'd stay. But by day 4 she was gone again. Left me with nothing but a half-eaten birthday cake and 2 overdue power bills. Her voice cracked. I don't think I ever really recovered from that. Wade didn't try to fix it. He just reached across the table and rested his hand over hers. She let it stay there. What will you do? He asked finally. I don't know, she murmured. Part of me wants to march straight to 5th Street and tell her everything she did wrong. And another part of me just wants to stay right here where it's quiet, where the girls sleep without fear. She wants to meet them. June's eyes filled again. She doesn't get to. Wade nodded. Then she won't. The following morning, June watched the girls chase chickens in the backyard, while Wade fixed the porch swing. The sky was blue and cloudless, a rare break from Montana's moody summer storms. Everything looked normal, peaceful. But inside her, a storm brewed. She hadn't told the girls about the letter. She wasn't sure she ever would. Because how do you explain to a child that some people don't show up the way you need them to? That even a mother's love can falter? As if hearing her thoughts, Ellie ran up and tugged on her shirt. Mommy, she said, grinning. I found an egg under the rose bush. June knelt, brushed a leaf from Ellie's hair, and kissed her cheek. You're a brave explorer, she said. Let's go make breakfast. Later that day, June wandered into the barn, a place Wade had quietly turned into a sanctuary. There were old tools, unfinished wood projects, and a shelf of dusty books he never quite had time to read. And there, on a high nail, hung a blank envelope with a pinhole. June pulled it down. Inside, a single index card with Wade's handwriting. You are not your past. You are not your mother. You are not what you survived. You are what you chose after. She stared at the card for a long time. Then she folded it, placed it in her pocket, and walked back into the sunlight, just in time to hear 2 little voices calling her name from the swing set. That evening, June walked out to the fire pit where Wade sat, watching embers crackle beneath the stars. She sat beside him and spoke without preamble. I'm not going to see her. Not yet. Wade nodded once. I think she wants to be forgiven. But that doesn't mean I owe her anything. You don't, Wade said. But if you ever want to forgive her, do it for yourself. June exhaled. I already did. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a long, quiet while they watched the flames together. No ghosts, no letters, just the sound of healing and a summer night stretching endlessly before them. It began with silence, not the quiet kind that falls softly over a sleepy farm. No, this silence was immediate, unnatural, the kind that yanks the air out of your lungs and leaves you running. Wade first noticed it just before noon. He'd come back from town with a box of screws and Ellie's favorite strawberry jam. He expected to hear the girls' laughter floating through the backyard, maybe see them chasing the hens or making up stories beneath the big cottonwood tree. But there was nothing. No giggles. No twin shadows darting across the garden. No trail of dolls or snack wrappers on the porch steps. He dropped the box of screws with a metallic thud and called out, "Ellie, Sophie." No answer. He checked the treehouse. Empty. The barn. Empty. The rope swing still swayed slightly in the breeze, as if someone had just jumped off. By the time he reached the back gate and saw it hanging open, his blood had gone cold. June had only stepped into town for an hour. She needed milk, a dozen eggs, and 10 minutes to breathe without tiny hands tugging at her jeans. She came home humming softly, a song she'd once known something about second chances and wide-open skies, only to find Wade pacing the driveway, with his jaw clenched and panic written all over his face. "They're gone," he said, before she could even put the car in park. "What do you mean gone? I've looked everywhere. The fence gate was open. I thought maybe they followed the dog, but he didn't have to finish. June was already running. They split up." Wade took the south road past the old cattle bridge and up the ridge trail where the girls loved to hike. June headed north toward the wildflower fields and the small stream where Sophie once tried to catch a frog with her bare hands. She yelled until her throat ached, called until her voice cracked. And then she saw them. Half a mile out across the meadow, 2 little figures walked side by side on the edge of the tall grass, heads down, hands clasped, backpacks slung across narrow shoulders. June froze. They hadn't run. They were leaving. The girls didn't notice her until she was right behind them. Ellie. Sophie. They stopped, stiffened. Ellie turned first. Her lip trembled. Sophie looked down. "I thought we were staying forever," June said gently, kneeling so her eyes were level with theirs. "You promised me you'd always tell me before you went anywhere." "We left a note," Sophie whispered, as if that made it okay. June blinked, stunned. A note Ellie fished in her pocket and handed her a crumpled paper napkin. In purple marker, it read, "Dear Wade and June, we love you, but we don't want to be given away again. So we are leaving first. Love, Ellie and Sophie." June felt her heart crack. She pulled them both into her arms. "No one is giving you away," she said over and over. "Not ever again. You're home. You're safe," Sophie whispered. "That lady from yesterday said she was our grandma." June went still. "Wade didn't want to tell you, but we heard. We saw the letter." June swallowed hard. "She's not part of this family," she said, with more calm than she felt. "And she's not coming here. You don't have to see her unless you want to. I promise. But if she takes you away, like she took your mommy away," before Ellie said, her voice breaking, "she won't. I'm not her, and I'm never leaving you." When they got home, Wade was waiting on the porch, hands in his hair. When he saw them, he crossed the yard in 5 long strides and dropped to his knees, gathering them both against his chest. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "That's on me. I should have told you what was in the letter. I didn't want to scare you." June watched the girls melt into his arms, and for the first time in days, the tightness in her chest eased. But as she turned toward the house, she saw something tucked beneath the doormat, a square envelope stamped, "Return to sender." It was the letter June had written weeks ago and never mailed. To her mother. Unopened. unanswered. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she picked it up and slipped it into the pocket of her jeans and didn't say a word. That night, after grilled cheese and tomato soup and one more round of goodnight moon than strictly necessary, June stood at the back door, arms crossed, watching Wade hammer a board over the broken fence gate. "You don't have to fix everything," she said softly. He glanced over his shoulder. "I know." She stepped closer. "They don't need perfect. They just need us to stay." Wade leaned the hammer against the fence post. "I didn't run," he said. "Not from them. Not from you. Not even when I wanted to." "I know." He turned toward her. "But maybe now's the time to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop." She smiled, tired, but genuine. "And do what instead," Livy said. "Stay. Grow roots." She nodded once, then stepped into his arms. Above them, the sky spread out wide and deep and stitched with stars, and for the first time in a long while, no one was running. The first crack of thunder arrived like a warning shot across the sky. Wade had just come in from the barn when the wind turned. It wasn't the usual Texas gust that kicked up dust and sent a hat flying. No, this wind had weight to it, the kind that shifts birds from trees and makes even sturdy men pause on their porch steps. The forecast had promised clear skies. It lied. By the time he and June stepped outside, the horizon had disappeared into a dark wall, rolling like smoke over the plains. A low, guttural growl echoed across the fields. Wade's dog Scout let out a long whimper and bolted for the crawl space under the house. Wade didn't hesitate. "Get the girls." Now. They barely made it to the storm cellar in time. June cradled the twins on the narrow bench, while Wade swung the heavy iron door closed above them. The hinges screamed, metal, groaned, and then darkness. The lantern flickered once before holding steady. They were safe. For now. Outside, the sky tore itself open. Wind howled through the cracks in the boards above, and debris slammed against the roof like angry fists. The air filled with a banshee wail, distant at first, then suddenly right above them. Sophie buried her head in June's side. Ellie trembled beside her. Wade reached out, covering their joined hands with his calloused palm. "We're together," he said. "That's what matters." The storm lasted less than 20 minutes. But in those 20 minutes, the world changed. When they finally emerged, the farm had been twisted sideways. The barn's side paneling had been ripped clean off. A water trough had flipped like a toy. Half the orchard looked as if it had been stepped on by a giant. But it was the treehouse that broke Wade's heart. Splintered. Collapsed. One of the twins' drawings, crayon hearts and stick figures, clung to a remaining shard of plywood, like a child left behind. Sophie stared at the mess in disbelief. "Is it gone forever?" Wade crouched beside her. "We'll build it again." Her lip quivered. "But it was the place where we made wishes. Then we'll build one even better, for bigger wishes." They cleaned for hours. Neighbors came with casseroles and chainsaws. June found herself thanking people she hadn't spoken to in years. Even the postman, who usually just tipped his hat, showed up with a generator. But something else had blown in with the storm, something harder to sweep away. That night, June couldn't sleep. She walked the porch barefoot, trailing her fingers along the railing, listening to the frogs reclaim the pond and the wind hum through broken branches. Behind her, the house flickered with candlelight, the power still out, the world oddly quieter in its absence. Wade joined her with 2 mugs of lukewarm tea. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Then storms don't scare me. What comes after does." He sipped. Waited. "I keep thinking she said how fast everything can disappear, how I almost lost them before I found them." "How you?" She paused, catching her breath. "How we all almost didn't get this." Wade set down his mug. You didn't lose them. And you didn't lose me. She looked at him, eyes wet but steady. What if I do? What if the next storm is something we can't see coming? Wade stepped closer, placing his hands gently on her arms. Then we hold on tighter. The next morning they found Sophie sitting cross-legged in the wreckage of the treehouse, arranging her broken pencils into a perfect circle. I'm not sad anymore, she said, simply. June knelt beside her. No, because sometimes you have to break a thing to make something better. Out of the mouths of babes, Wade thought. That afternoon he brought out his toolbox. If we're going to rebuild, he said we need an architect. Ellie beamed. We want stairs, not a ladder, for the dog. Deal. And a roof window, Sophie added. June watched them draw plans in chalk on the sidewalk. The storm had scattered more than trees. It had scattered fear, doubt, silence, and left behind space for something stronger. That evening, as twilight bled orange across the sky, Wade found June behind the barn, holding the unopened letter from her mother, the one that had come back marked, "Return to sender." You ever gonna read it? He asked. It's blank inside, she said. Wade blinked. What? June held it out. I opened it. I don't even remember writing it. Just empty paper. Like I was begging someone who never really existed to hear me. She paused. Maybe that's what I needed, to see that there was nothing there. He nodded slowly. And now, I think I'm done chasing ghosts. She let the letter fall into the fire pit beside her, where the flames caught the edge, curling it into orange. Wade slid his hand into hers. Good. Because the living need you more. Later that night, lightning flickered on the horizon again. But this time, no one ran. It was the first morning in weeks where the air didn't carry the scent of loss or recovery. Instead, it smelled like pancakes. Wade stood at the stove in his flannel shirt, humming an old George Strait tune, while the twins sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, arguing over whether syrup should touch the eggs. Scout wagged his tail like a metronome, hopeful for a fallen scrap. June leaned against the doorway, arms folded, hair still damp from the shower. She wasn't in a rush. There was nowhere to go. For the first time in years, there was no next disaster to plan, for no storm to watch on the horizon, only this strange and tender peace. Wade noticed her watching him and smiled. What's that look? She tilted her head. Just trying to figure out when exactly you became the best part of my day. He chuckled. Somewhere between rescuing you out of a tree and fixing your fence, I suppose. More like somewhere between pancakes and not running away. That afternoon, the community held a small rebuilding celebration at the churchyard. It wasn't official, just neighbors bringing pies and folding chairs, someone wheeling out an old boombox. The twins handed out hand-drawn thank you cards to every person who had shown up with chainsaws or casseroles after the storm. Thanks for saving our chickens, Sophie said to Mr. Jenkins. And for fixing the power, Ellie chirped to Miss Caldwell, the town librarian, who had somehow rewired a fuse box with knitting needles. June sat beside Wade under the oak tree that still stood scarred but unbroken. I used to believe life only gave you one chance, she said almost to herself. One shot at normal, at love, at family. He didn't interrupt. She looked over at him. Turns out that's not true. You can fall apart and still come home. Wade studied her face, those eyes no longer wild with fear, but calm even when blinking away the sun. I think he said slowly, you and the girls didn't just come home. You built it. That night, June found the box in the attic. It had been packed by someone else long ago, maybe a social worker, or one of the emergency nurses who'd treated her after she was found walking barefoot along Highway 11, clutching the twins and murmuring songs from her childhood. The box was marked simply property of June Marin. Inside were things she hadn't remembered she'd lost. A photo of her holding the girls in the hospital. A worn children's book with a ripped cover, The Runaway Bunny. A key on a purple ribbon she still didn't know to what. And a letter. This one she hadn't written. It was from her late husband. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even long. But it was real. I know I'm not right in the head, and maybe you'll hate me for that. I just want you to remember you're stronger than me, smarter than me, and the only reason those girls have a chance in hell is because they've got you. If I disappear, it's not because I didn't love you. It's because I didn't love myself enough to stay. She read it 3 times, then closed the box. Downstairs, Wade was folding laundry. The girls were painting something on the patio. She walked into the kitchen still holding the letter and said only, "I'm ready." Wade looked up. For what to let go? He nodded. Then let's do that. Together. A few weeks later, they had a wedding. Quiet. In the backyard. The girls wore flower crowns. Wade wore his cleanest boots. June carried a bouquet of sunflowers and sage picked by the girls that morning. There wasn't a band, but Ellie played Twinkle Twinkle on a ukulele. June's vows were simple. I used to believe I was broken beyond repair. But you showed me that being broken isn't the end of the story. It's just the start of something new. You weren't my rescue. You were my return. Wade's were quieter. You're not a miracle I saw coming, but you're the one I get to keep. Months passed. The treehouse was rebuilt taller this time with a skylight and stairs for Scout. Sophie planted wildflowers beneath it. Ellie hung wind chimes. June wrote again. Not just in notebooks, but for real stories essays. A column in the local paper called Second Chances. People loved it. One fall evening, as the wind turned crisp and the pumpkins glowed along the porch, June asked Wade, "Do you ever think about how close we came to missing all of this?" Wade wrapped an arm around her. All the time. She smiled softly. And now, he said, kissing her temple. I thank God every day that tree didn't break. As the stars came out, the girls snuggled under the quilt on the porch swing, drifting to sleep with Scout at their feet. June traced the curve of Wade's hand as it rested on hers. It wasn't a perfect life. It was better. It was theirs. And every messy, beautiful, hard-earned day of it was a miracle worth staying for. And just like that, what began with a rescue from a tree became a daily miracle that none of them ever saw coming. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and share your corner of the world with us. It's always a joy to see how far these stories travel. And if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe so you won't miss the next story waiting to find you at just the right time. Thank you truly for spending these moments with us. From our heart to yours, take care, stay kind, and never stop believing in the quiet power of love.